Radio News Hour, Joe and Jason on this Tuesday. I hope it finds you well out there. If you're a D-back fan, you're pretty happy. Game 7 tonight. The winner is going to face the Texas Rangers in the World Series. Normally I don't care, but the Diamondbacks are in it, so I'm going to pay attention. Let's go D-backs, right? Them and the Phillies. I know that I'm sure whoever has the ratings for them, I'm sure that they do not want the Diamondbacks in there. That I could almost guarantee. They're probably hoping and praying that somehow the Phillies get that victory. So we'll watch and see there. Other than that, the NBA's getting ready to start, if anybody cares about that. And outside of that, Jason, everything is still Middle East this, Middle East that. What's going to happen right now? The bombardment continues. No invasion yet, but I'm sure that is coming. Our toll-free number, 800-951-0592. The website at allamericangold.com. And Jamie Dimon was out again, this time taking his wrath to the central bank. And you know, I'll say this. He's only mad because the Fed knows that these banks are insolvent. And they are supposed to be out there protecting. Not only does the Fed know it, the FDIC knows it, the comptroller of the currency knows it. They need to regulate these banks. I mean, really, ultimately, at the end of the day, shouldn't that really be the Fed's job? Right? They shouldn't be in the money issuance game. We don't have to issue debt with interest. We don't have to do that. Shouldn't that really just be their jobs? Hey, regulate these banks so they don't do stupid stuff. But, of course, you know, what can you do? But he called them out about how they missed everything, how they missed inflation, how they don't have a handle on what's going on. You know, Mohammed Al-Arian, what was that? Was that last week? Talking about the Fed has no strategy whatsoever. They don't have a strategic bone in their body. And really, the big thing, though, that Jamie Dimon's worried about now is the size of debt and how much debt. And you got to remember, it's not just us issuing debt. The World Bank issues debt. The IMF issues debt. The Eurozone's issuing debt. Japan is issuing debt. China's issuing debt. All of these companies that have to refinance debt. By the way, another property in San Francisco getting ready to go belly up. But again, I think this is what we're in for. How is all of this debt going to get financed? And then the realities are going to be, by the way, a lot of debt that needs to be refinanced won't be refinanced because it's not worth what they borrowed on it, and therefore the jingle mail is going to continue to come. As an example, an office tower in San Francisco. This wasn't office. I apologize. This was an apartment building, which is kind of shocking because you don't normally, rents are great, apartments are full. In 2018, it was valued, this apartment building is a big one, valued at $543 million. Well, today, they got a new number. Now, of the $543 million, they borrowed $384. So you're like, okay, that's not bad, right? They got some skin in the game here. Well, the loan now, they say the building is only worth $279 million. And Jason, the landlord, has said, hey, get ready. We're going to mail the keys back because they're like, we're not even collecting enough to service the debt at the $384 million. Now it's only worth $279. Right? The math just doesn't work.
That's correct, Joe. That's correct. And this is a day-by-day situation. It just gets a little worse each day because there's just no money floating around. The printing presses aren't printing at the moment. The contraction, the higher interest rates, coupled with the high inflation, is going to make more situations like what you're talking about happen again and again. I think there's a lot of these big commercial buildings are going to be taking on a lot of water, Joe, and even the residential, real estate markets are probably getting ready to have some pain and suffering too, because you can't sell it because it's too expensive, and you can't buy it because it's too expensive. Then I guess that means that the prices have to come down as you get a little demand destruction.
It's a double whammy because they borrowed it. Don't think about 2018. They borrowed it for next to nothing, right? They borrowed $384 million. They probably borrowed it at like 3%. Just having to cycle, because remember, all that stuff is interest only. They got to borrow it now and pay 7%, 8% on top of, the building's now worth $100 million less than what we paid for it. So not only do you got to come up with at least another $100 million, then you got to factor, oh my gosh, wait a minute, my payment is double. Here's a great example: home buyers. Home buyers. Do you know your dollars are worth half of what they were in 2019? You can buy half the amount of house you could in 2019. It's the same problem everywhere. When we get back, we're going to highlight what's really happening in these debt markets. You're not going to want to miss it. Stay with us. 800-951-0592. Joe and Jason, Patriot Radio News Hour. Quick look in here at the markets. The Dow's up 270. Had a down day yesterday. It's up so far. It's early. We'll see. The S&P's up 30. The Nasdaq's up $100. The 10-year note actually a little higher today. Had a big sell-off yesterday. 488 on the 10-year note. Crude oil's off right now. We've had a big jump in crypto. The same guys that are buying bought crypto last time, buying it again. We'll talk about that. The IRS. This is getting creepy. They want way more information than they should when it comes to crypto. We'll get to that. Gold right now is down $15. Silver's off 24 cents. And if you're looking for alternatives, okay, what do I do with my money? I got to have my gold. I got to have my silver, right? I've got a 401k. I've got the IRA, right? I've got, I'm saving some money. But look at Wall Street, 33,100, 33,200. Really hasn't moved in 3 years. It's gone up and down, right? It's been as high as, 36, 37. Got down to like 29. But it's really sat here for 3 years. And unfortunately, everybody's kind of saying, wait, we're waiting for the next bust, right? So we're kind of at the top. And a lot of people are talking about, hey, we could have another 5 to 10 years of no returns, or heaven forbid, negative returns. It may be a great time to look at alternatives to Wall Street. That's why we've been telling you about why refi, right? This is private student loan debt. I don't need to bore you. We've told you the story. These banks are ruthless. They load up these kids with all of this debt, make their parents or grandparents co-sign loans that they can never get rid of. The clock starts the second they graduate or the second they drop out, either one. And, man, as soon as they miss a payment, that's it. It's done. They're in the cycle, boom, and they're hung out to dry for the rest of their lives. But that's where why refi comes in. They help the ones that should. They help them. They give them a great interest rate. They buy their debt out of collections. There's been a bankruptcy filing. The judge issued these settlements. The average borrower that why refi helps, has their entire debt paid off in 8.5 years. That's like a new car loan. Yet the banks said these people were terrible, right? And this is why I love them so much. You get a great fixed rate of return up to 10.25%. And right now, why refi? They have a pool, a line of people that they know they can help. They just need more money to help them. This is so funny. You got Joe Biden and the government. We got to forgive student loan debt. No, not really. Not really. For the ones that are capable of doing it, they just need somebody to give them a break, and you guys can be a part of that. Get up to 10.25% return, fixed, not correlated to Wall Street. Man, that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. I mean, I'll be honest with you. If you ask me right now, and I'll ask you, you know what, Jason, I'll ask you. Do you think the Dow is going to be higher or lower 5 years from today? Or the same?
I think 5 years from today, based off what I'm seeing currently in 2023, it'll be lower. I think it'll be lower in 5 years. I think it'll be lower in 10 years also.
And I'm telling you, hey, if you've got $50,000 or more, you can get up to 10.25% return, and you can do what you want. You turn your income on, you can turn it off. They don't attack your principal at all. If you need your money back, they don't charge fees. Check them out. InvestYRefy.com. That's the word invest, the letter Y, REFY.com, or call them at 888-YREFI24. Jamie Dimon, he was in, well, shouldn't surprise anybody. He's in Saudi Arabia. He was in Riyadh. And it's funny because I would love for him, why doesn't he go on CNBC and say this stuff? Why doesn't he go on Maria Bartiromo, say this stuff? What did he say? He said the fact that central banks got financial forecasting 100% dead wrong should prompt humility from them about their outlook for what's coming next year. Now, the Fed tells everybody next year's going to be fine. That's what they're saying. Right? Soft landing. Heck, we may not even have recession. Matter of fact, one of the Fed guys, he was on CNBC the other day. Bostic. Oh, no, we're not having a recession. No way. I'm an expert here. I'm looking at all the numbers. Jamie Dimon apparently does not have that view. And he said that in his discussion in Riyadh, Dimon voiced doubts that the central banks and governments around the world are going to be able to manage the economic fallout, not only from rising inflation, not only from slowing global growth, but fiscal spending more than ever has become a huge, huge issue. Talking about the deficit spending in peacetime, central banks and governments are not going to be able to manage through all of this stuff. And he goes, I'd be very cautious about what is going to happen next year. He said that today's situation is that of the global economy of the 70s. Okay, so that was big time inflation. But he said, there's another problem. That was big time inflation without a lot of debt. Heck, the U.S. didn't even have $1 trillion in debt in the 70s. Not even $1 trillion. He goes, listen to what he said about rates. I don't think it makes a piece of difference whether rates go up 25 basis points, whether the whole yield curve goes up another 100 basis points, you better be prepared for it. I don't know if it's going to happen. What is he saying right there? Let me tell you what he's saying. Rates are going. I think Jamie Dimon thinks rates are going a lot higher. And it doesn't matter if the Fed raises a quarter point or not, that the bond market, the amount of debt, listen, he knows, his company knows. The amount of debt issuance, they just told us, the federal deficit was $1.7 trillion. Right? It was plastered everywhere. That was a bald-faced lie. That's not true. It was true on a ledger because they took the deficit, which was over $2 trillion, lowered it by $333 billion because Biden didn't get student loan debt forgiveness. Now, in fairness, last year's debt, which was $1.4 trillion, that was inflated by $300 billion. So think about it. Really, the debt scenario is actually much worse than what they're saying, because they said the deficit went from 1.4 to 1.7. It actually went from 1.1 to almost 2.1. Really, let's just call it doubled, Jason. The debt doubled in a single year. That's the facts. That's the reality. But here's what makes it worse. In the first 24 days of this fiscal year, the debt has jumped by another $500 billion. In other words, let's face it, the Fed they were just playing games to keep this number lower. We've issued over $500 billion of debt, and we're not even done with the first month of fiscal year 2024. And I think this is why Jamie Dimon's saying, I don't see this debt issuance slowing down. And it doesn't matter. The Fed has no idea what they're talking about. They should have no credibility. You know what? Honestly, isn't Jamie Dimon saying that Jay Powell should be fired over this? I mean, wouldn't that be, you missed it by 100%.
How's the deficit going to be affected when the Fed successfully gets rid of all the jobs they've been trying to get rid of, and then there's less revenue coming in? Because they're on 10% down revenue and 10% up on spending. So, when they find, their goal is to get the jobs. So when there's no jobs, there's no tax revenue. So it's their plan is to have more deficit, Joe. So I think what Jamie Dimon's talking about is like, look, it's not going to. I think he understands. I think we all that look at this understand that the Fed can lose control. It is possible they can lose control. The only question is, do they want to lose control? What is the end game to how the dust settles, so to speak?
Yeah, and think about this. I think fiscal year 2024 debt will be 10% of GDP, somewhere between 2.5 and $3 trillion. It could be more than 10% of GDP. That would be worse than 1929 to put it in perspective. That would be, matter of fact, this year's real number, the $2 trillion, puts us at 1929. But again, inside of this, why has Jamie Dimon been making these warnings lately? Well, because he's probably looking at actual numbers. Tax revenues. Now, this is something, we didn't have Joey on this week, but Joey's been talking about this. His company believes your taxes are going to go way up. And you better be prepared. The Biden administration may be forced to increase taxes as revenue continues to decline. Now, they did raise taxes on some people last year. Government receipts for taxes, $4.4 trillion, or roughly 16.5% of GDP. Okay, so we're going to run a deficit next year of $2.5 to $3 trillion. That's almost right. Think about how much you would have to raise taxes, right? That you would almost have to double the taxes, double them. By the way, that number, 4.4 trillion, was 9.3% lower than 2022. And now Jamie Dimon is saying, I'm not buying the Federal Reserve's rosy scenario for 2024, which says to me, he thinks this number is going even lower. Right? Could it be 4 trillion? On top of this, the central bank, which, and think about this insanity. They make money up out of thin air, charge us interest for it, and then pretend they make money. This year, because of quantitative tightening, the Federal Reserve's lost $120 billion, but the year before, they gave $106 billion in profits to the government. So now that number's gone, right? There is no remittance, right? I think Jamie Dimon's starting to do some math on his fingers and his toes and saying, uh-oh, that's a whole lot more debt that needs to be issued than what they're talking about. We'll be back. $800-951-0592. Joe and Jason, Patriot Radio News Hour here on this Tuesday. $5 Liberty. So these are going to be the 1866 to 1907 quarter-ounce gold piece on sale today. Regular price $575. You're going to take $10 off. So $565. If you buy 20 or more, I'm going to take them down to $560. 20 of them would be $11,200. $560 for a quarter ounce. $5 Liberty is an absolute screaming buy. We're going to have all-time record high gold prices before you know it. And Jamie Dimon just telling you facts. Here's the truth. Spending's out of control. I have no confidence that the governments and the central bank, and notice, listen, not just ours. Right, Jason? He's like, hey, listen, we're not the only sinking ship out there. There's no way these guys are going to be able to fix this. And by the way, I think the worst part is he's telling people, don't believe them when they tell you about their economic predictions, especially what they're saying in 2024. He's basically saying, don't believe them.
I think that's somewhat logical. I don't really like agreeing with the banker.
No.
But if they're admitting it, it could be far worse than he could be giving us the soft version, Joe. He might not, he probably doesn't want to give you the all-out worst catastrophe that he's looking at. But I'll bet he's playing to be ready for it, though.
I'm going to tell you right now, I think Jamie Dimon thinks the 10-year note is going to yield over 7%. We're sitting here laughing, oh my gosh, we touched 5. I think he thinks he thinks it's going to be north of 7 because you're not going to be able to get enough people to want to buy it. Because, again, this is a different – think about what he really said. First, he talked about, hey, we've got 70s-style inflation here.
Yep.
That's what he said. Which means we're going to have to pay a lot more to get people to put their money into the debt markets. It just makes sense. It's simple math. And then you do the math with the government spending. Listen, and I know they played a little shell game here. It doesn't matter. If tax revenues fall by the same amount next year as they did this year. Now, that's an if, but if they do, already, just automatically, the debt's now $2.5 trillion. But the rates are higher, right? And they keep going higher. So now all of a sudden, Jason, $3 trillion right there staring you in the face. We went from $1 trillion to $2 trillion in 1 year. Could we go from $2 trillion to $3 trillion in the next year? It is very, very possible. And I think this is what has Jamie Dimon so freaked out.
It can go $2 trillion to $6 trillion in the next year. It's called hyperinflation. You don't have to have hyperinflation to where a $5 item is $500. You don't have to have that kind of hyperinflation. You can have the $5 item become the $50 item. And in your scenario, Joe, a $2 trillion deficit could go to a $6 trillion or $8 trillion deficit very quickly.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. The government's beefing up the IRS agents. One of the things, and I'll just say, because, crypto had a big jump yesterday. It went up like $3,000, right? Well, the IRS, listen to this nonsense. 300 pages of what they want to do when it comes to people that are owning cryptocurrencies. 300 pages. According to the IRS and the Joint Committee on Taxation, they think this is worth $28 billion. And I'm like, that's a ton of money. But we just issued $500 billion in 20 days. I mean, right, $28 billion is a drop in the bucket. But it's funny, it is what they want from people. They want to know everything about a person that's in position with the cryptocurrencies. They want to know the identity of the purchaser, right? So think about one of the things about crypto, right? You're supposed to be, quote unquote, anonymous, right? Nope. They want to know all kinds of information. Once they know who the person is, they want to know where the money came from, right? Well, where did they get the money to buy the cryptocurrency? They also want to know everything about any transactions that they made within their crypto wallet. They want every crypto wallet on every site to be attached to your Social Security number. And again, Jason, I think this is something where I don't know exactly what's going to happen here, but it sure looks like the government is not messing around when it comes to all this. I mean, think about this now. PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, anybody that gets over $600 in these apps, here comes 1099s. I mean, and now on the crypto space, the government essentially saying, hey, we want to know everything about this person. It's just like in the eyes of the IRS, it's almost like they're saying, crypto's just like your bank account. We want access to everything.
Well, that's what the tax collectors do. They want a drop of blood from every source possible. So they're, with digital, it becomes a little easier for them to do it. Hiring 87,000 new IRS agents makes it easier for them to do such a thing. People that are buying houses, they can, it's not the IRS, but it's taxes in general, Joe. So your property taxes going up. And property taxes going up, as we said in previous episodes, makes your house insurance go up. And that can make all your other insurance go up. It's inflation. It's a monster that feeds upon itself. And let me make it very, very basic and simple, because all of these different factors cause all of this hardships upon the people. But inflation is one simple thing. It's the creation of money. That is it. That's really all it is at the very basic. And Joe, they created a lot of money in 2020.
$5 liberties 1 through 19, 565, 20 or more at 560, 800-951-0592. 800-951-0592. The Dow starting to give back some of these gains, and gold's coming back here, down 6 here, 1966. Silver above $23. The $5 liberties. And this is especially if you can get 20 or more at 560. I mean, it's just a fantastic way to own fractional gold at 800-951-0592, especially when you think about where we're at debt-wise. It's a problem. And again, I'm only focusing on us. You should see what Japan is doing, what China is doing, what Europe is doing. There's so much debt issuance out there. And then how about this today? General Motors beat earnings, came out great earnings for General Motors immediately after the earnings came out. The UAW launched a strike at another GM plant, 5,000 more workers, and again, right where it hurts, Chevy Tahoe, Chevy Suburban, the Yukon, and the Cadillac Escalade, those that are built in Texas. And here's what the union said. Another record quarter. Another record year. As we said for a month, record profits equates to record contracts. It's time GM workers and the whole working class get their fair share. And Jason, that's a dangerous, dangerous thing. As we know, here today, gone tomorrow when it comes to profits. I don't know how this thing's going to end. It's already gone way farther than I thought it would. And the fact that, again, what are they talking about? 30% raises, right? Not to mention better health care. They want pensions back, right? They want to work less. And this is what happened. Go back to what Jamie Dimon was talking about. This is the problem.
You can almost say inflation, everybody getting their fair share. If everybody getting their fair share is going to become more inflation. It's once again, it's a vicious circle, right? And it's going to keep happening until someone stops a private institution from printing and contracting the money at their whims. It's supposed to be the citizens voting the Congress. The Congress does the spending, and the money creation is done by the Congress. And by the way, when the Congress creates the money, there's no interest to be paid at that creation of money. But we don't have that. For over 100 years, we've had these crooks who Joe talks about, the dumb decisions they make. I don't know if so much of it's so dumb when they benefit from it all these years. Let's just face it, that's a nice club to be in, Joe. Mistakes or successes, I think they win on both sides. They always collect profits amongst themselves, and then they brush all losses to the government. So this will never end, and yeah, these unions are going to need their fair share, and that just means, well, I guess how much is a car going to be next year, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is I think where a lot of people sit here, right? The chances for record revenue to the government, right, declines, right? Profitability declines. Yeah, workers are going to get more money, so they'll pay more in payroll tax, right? Social Security, it only lost $50 billion this year. What's $50 billion? Of course, that doesn't include what Medicare and Medicaid lost. They actually lost a lot more than that, but still, right? Could have been worse, right? But hey, the good news on Social Security was, well, workers are getting paid more, so at least we collect. It still wasn't enough, but at least we collected more revenue. And Jason, the problem is you give out these raises, it's very hard to go back and take them away. Remember what happened to the autos, the big three, the last time this happened? They had these big, generous pay packages. They all had to file bankruptcy, right? And everyone's pay got cut in half. And again, is it any surprise, right? Where did all these big pay packages go? Well, in the inflations of the 70s is where it all started.
I remember back, and I can't remember, you and I weren't there, but remember the 1800s, there was no inflation. And guess what else they didn't have? They didn't have Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and on and on. No government handouts because the government wasn't there to hand things. The federal government was not there to hand anything out. And there was no inflation, Joe. So when they tack a little bit more onto those programs, because they're going to have to, remember fair share, retired people need to have their fair share too, Joe. And won't keep up with the inflation I think that we're looking at in the near future, Joe.
Yeah, it's going to be something where I'm not really sure how any of this is going to play out when you have somebody like Jamie Dimon saying, hey, why are we, again, this is just what I heard. Hey, these guys were 100% wrong on what they said was going to happen financially. And I think they're at least, and again, I'm reading between the lines. He's saying they're going to be 100% wrong again about what they're saying, what's coming just in the next 6 to 12 months, and that everybody better be prepared. I don't think anybody. I'll tell you this right now. I'm not prepared for 6% on a 10-year note. I'm definitely not prepared for 7% on a 10-year note. I just don't know how equities survives in that environment. I definitely know this. Banks don't survive in that environment. We already know commercial real estate's already a problem. That's going to be much, much worse. Housing's practically dead. Now, prices haven't fallen, but the amount of people that actually can afford to own a home, housing's unaffordable in 99% of all of the country right now. I don't know, how much worse does it get, right? Yeah, gold's looking real good right now. 800-951-0592. Patriot Radio News Hour. Joe and Jason, we'll be right back. $800-951-0592. Joe and Jason wrapping up this Tuesday. Gold's now down 1968. Silver also coming right back here, down about 10 cents here, right below $23. Meta is being sued by 33 state attorney generals for addictive features targeting kids. That's going to hurt Meta's bottom line. After the bell today, we'll get Alphabet. So we'll get news on Google after the bell as well. But it was really all about Jamie Dimon. I see now CNBC actually has it up on one of their headlines. Jamie Dimon ripped Central Bank for being 100% dead wrong on economic forecasts. And the problem is, Jason, looks like he's saying they're still dead wrong. And I think that's the big problem. We've been saying this for several years about how the bottom seems to be falling out, but it looks like it's going to be a slow, grinding economic downturn, and then it'll suddenly go all at once, and seems like we're getting closer and closer to a quickening of the economy getting bad, and that's just what Jamie Dimon's saying, Joe. I'm sure he understands this stuff far better than I do, and if I can see it, then he must have a very much of a more intimate understanding of what he sees, right? So for him to say this, I'll say it again. For him to be saying this, it must be far worse than he's getting on. Of course, creating a little bit of panic for your smaller competitors makes it so that he can scoop up some cheap assets. He's probably getting excited. And if he's getting excited, Joe, that means it's getting ready to happen because big players love this stuff. The system is rigged, and once you know how to play with the rigged rules, and you have a position where you have an ear to getting some crucial information, he's probably getting excited. It's happening, and he's scaring his competitors. Right? Yeah,
he's one of the winners.
Right?
Yep.
How many more bad banks are you just going to give to me on peanuts on the dollar? I'm going to buy all the good assets for pennies on the dollar and then make the taxpayer pay for all the bad assets. Yeah, that's a win-win, right? I mean, he probably is.
And some J.P. Morgan banks have been closed around the country. I think last week 54 branches of some of the big banks closed last week. Many of those were J.P. Morgan Chase, and you might think, well, geez, he must be having a tough time. No, this kind of seems like he's cutting some expense to gain more revenue for this thing, doesn't it, Joe? Hey, if we cut down 10, 15, 20, 30 banks, this revenue gets a little better. I'll be able to buy some things here pretty soon. That's what it seems like.
Right, and digital means we need less banks anyway, right? We don't need all the branches that the future is going to hold. I mean, they're really, when you look at the big banks, you look at the big four especially, they're really giving us a good indication of what the future is going to be, because all of them, they're closing, between those, just the big four banks, they have closed thousands of branches just this year alone, and it doesn't look like there's any end in sight because, well, let's face it, pretty soon the need for the average person to go to a bank is probably going to disappear because, well, you're going to have digital Federal Reserve money instead. Get your gold put away, the $5 Liberties 1 through 9, $5.65, 20 or more at $5.60 at 800-951-0592. Jason and I, we're coming right back with the Hat 50 Cup.